Yeah, I'm not sure whether you know about NITheCS. You probably don't. Okay, NITheCS, just briefly. Yeah, NITheCS is the National Institute for Theoretical and Computational Sciences. And Kang here is the coordinator of one of our research programs. Yeah? But we are not only interested in, let's call it quantitative biology. Yeah, we also support theoretical physics, astrophysics, mathematics, statistics, data science, climate change modeling, and quantitative finance. So it's 8 disciplines in total, and we have around 10 research programs, one of which is the one that Ken is organizing. Yeah? What might also be interesting to know for you is that we are a consortium of all universities in South Africa. Yeah, so all universities. So we are essentially like an old-fashioned bank because we have branches at every university. Yeah, we don't have ATMs. We have branches, still physical branches at all universities. So and we have in total around 400 associates scattered across the country, but the hub is here in Stellenbosch. Yeah. And I won't say anything anymore because I was told that John, whoever John is, will introduce the speaker. Okay. So John, pleased to meet you. Yeah, meet you too. Then I give you. Yes, that's it. Yeah, I would have done it as well. I put this so everybody can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
People online watch the talk.
Okay.
Thank you very much and welcome to Stellenbosch.
Thank you.
Thank you. So a very brief introduction of Fernanda, a colleague and friend, and Dr. Fernanda Valdovinos is originally from Chile, did a PhD in Universidad de Chile, and then did a postdoc right in the University of Arizona in Tucson, got into the drylands, enjoyed that, and then on to University of Michigan. Luckily, we managed to recruit her to the University of California, Davis, where she's now a colleague and a professor there. She's worked on, I guess, theoretical ecology, food web modeling on land and on sea. And more, I think we're pulling her into the sea, and she's growing definitely in integrated perspectives, right? Like getting more complex at the same time, trying to reduce it to the essence of how do you model these systems. I think it's a pleasure being here with you, and it's a pleasure having you as a colleague. And if you want to tell me more stories about yourself, you can do that. I think I'll skip it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, John. Let's get started. We're here for the science. So I'm going to talk about modeling marine food webs to study their sustainability in a changing world. Is it moving? There? What's that?
Speak on your slide.
With this, okay. Okay, there you go. So we all know that we are over-harvesting our oceans. So, and some of the fisheries are collapsing worldwide. In particular, here in this slide, we have the cod fisheries. But in general, we're really over-harvesting them. So that's one of the challenges we're facing in terms of sustainability. We're also facing climate change, and a lot has been said about the oceans heating up. But I will also present about other problems that climate change is causing in these ecosystems, which is about productivity, primary productivity. So these are the two challenges that these ecosystems are facing, and I will talk about them today. And I want to start by acknowledging all the people behind this work. So my lab at UC Davis, collaborators, John Lagier at UC Davis on the oceanographic part and productivity and other things, and Mike Springboard, also at UC Davis in our department, Environmental Science and Policy. He does the more economic side of things. So I will present more integration with fisheries in terms of the economic side as well. And as John said, I was a professor as well in the University of Michigan. So also work that I did there with colleagues there and other collaborators that visited me there. So I want to start with what we do in a very general way in terms of why we use networks to study these questions on ecology. And I like to think about it as that networks make ecological complexity more tractable. Think of the many ways in which hundreds of species can interact. Those are almost infinite if you just do the combinatory, like randomly. So think of it as the entire room here of the all possible ways in which that can happen. And the tip of my finger is how it actually happens. So what I want to say with that is that networks have allowed us to identify the non-random ways in which nature assembles these interactions, these ecological interactions. And that's one of the reasons why networks are a great way of thinking about these systems. Also, networks are great for studying the responses of whole communities to perturbations. So back in the day when we were not using networks in ecology, we were focusing on a few species, pairwise interactions, and that was it. And we know that there are more interconnections among species, and that's something that we can study with networks. And finally, when we characterize the structures in networks, we can then think about their dynamics. And when we have both, then we can ask about this interplay between structure and dynamics and how that interplay influences the way that ecosystems respond to perturbations. So the talk I will go over today is more an overview of my work, our work in the lab and collaborators. And it is going to be about 4 projects. The first, it evaluates the effects of alteration of coastal productivity and in terms of, that's kind of like more like the climate change part and artisanal fisheries on a marine food web in Chile. That's how everything started in this area of research for us. Then another project that integrates economic dynamics into food web models to assess fishery sustainability. And we have 2 papers published on that. And then models that integrate empirical variability in phytoplankton subsidy to reveal at-risk species in a Chilean intertidal ecosystem. And finally, we are now currently working on resolving primary production in coastal marine food webs. So this approach, as I said, is relevant and its contribution is about thinking of the entire system. So, for example, this fisherman is taking this particular species of the system, like biomass of this species, but this species is part of a food web, of a community. And either if our focus is on preserving the community and not getting these ripple effects of extracting the biomass of one species in the rest of the network, or if it's about the target species, in both situations, it's important to think about how these interactions would affect either the target species or the extraction of the target species on the ecosystem. So that's the contribution we are making. And that is in the context of ecosystem-based fisheries management, which is something that managers have been asking for a long time. So in the bottom, we have when you focus on single species. So it's all about only like, oh, we want to go, like, we don't want this species to go extinct because we relied on it. Then we have that species with the climate and some predators. But then when we're focusing on is like the entire community. And that's where we are, is our contribution, and it's really cutting edge still. It's something that we still don't know very well how it works, and that's where we're doing more and more on science on it. And this is the paper that I said it started this collaboration with many colleagues, and why we are in this workshop in Stellenbosch. So I will talk about this, and it's this interaction between alteration of cost of productivity and artisanal fisheries. And this is the system. It's Chile, the Chilean coast, and you can see it in the map. And the point is that these artisanal fisheries extract several types of species from the intertidal. This is the food web. So in the bottom, we have the producers, so think of them as algae, plankton, etc. Then the ones that are consuming them, the herbivores, some filter feeders, and then some consumers and top predators at the very top. This system has 107 species. 19 of them are harvested. And there have been 1,300 links that have been reported. So it's a food web of this type of organisms who have anemones, birds, limpets. Those are the top predators. None of them are harvested. But the predators, we have 38 of them: Echinoderma, baloni, chiton, etc. Crabs, 13 of them are harvested. Filter feeders, we have mussels, Rhipidia, tunicates, etc. Those are, of those, 2 species are harvested. And then the basal species that you can find, the filaments, the plankton, the crust, all those algae, the kelp, etc. 5 of them are harvested. So here's where we represent the fisheries, is that node there with an F, red F. And the links, the red links, are the ones they are connecting that fisheries link to the harvested species. And the size of the nodes is their biomass. So we have now the model, the mathematical model. And so each node, each species in the food web has a dynamic equation that tells you how the biomass of that population changes over time. So that is dB and dt. Then we have a maintenance loss. So this is the bioenergetic model, which means that it's tracking how much the metabolic rate is dissipating in energy. So maintenance loss is that. You can think of it also as mortality. Then gain from resources, and that is what they're consuming. This particular species is consuming like all this other, right? So those links are the ones that are feeding that sum here. So that is all the different resources that have been consumed by that species. And then the loss to consumption. So those are the predators that are extracting the biomass of this particular species because they are consuming them. And finally, that term over here is accounting for harvesting effort only for the harvested species. And that is for animals, for consumers. And for the producers, we have another type of equation that has the logistic growth right there, and loss to the consumers that are the herbivores. And finally, if they're harvested, they have this term on the fishing effort. So that is a mathematical model for the base model. And the convenient aspect of this particular model that is called the allometric trophic network model, the ATN model, is that the parameters can be estimated using body size. So the point is that if you have the body sizes of the species in the system, the average body size of the species in the system, you can estimate using these functions that are allometric functions. You can estimate their intrinsic growth rate of producers, which is this little r here, metabolic rate of consumers, that is that x in there, and attack rate of the consumers, that is, well, the maximum attack rate of the consumers, that is that y over there. So with that, you have most of the parameters estimated, and there's some free parameters that we try to change only when we have justification. So this, for the mathematicians in the room, biologists, we have this allometric scaling that is kind of like one of the few laws we have. And so we have mass in the x-axis, metabolic rate in the y-axis, and we know that across wide range of taxa, we can organize them in this way. So if each dot is an actual empirical point, and then you have this relationship in which the higher the mass, the higher the metabolic rate, and when you divide metabolic rate by the mass of the organism, then you have the opposite relationship. And we use those for this allometric scaling. Okay, so that's with the biology. Now we talk about the fishing efforts. And the fishing effort is used broadly as a measure of amount of fishing, and it can represent anything between number of hours or days spent fishing, numbers of hooks used, etc. Is still an abstract quantity, but it can represent any of this. And it's the major metric through which fishing is managed. Okay, that's all about fisheries. And we now talk about the plankton, because we want to talk about alteration of productivity that could be driven by climate change or anything else. And this is the plankton node in our system in blue. And the lines, the links in blue are are connecting all the consumers of that plankton. So it's sustaining a lot of the primary, so it's fueling the system, bottom up. And the way we modeled it, because the point is that these mathematical models of food webs are closed. They're about a local food web. And this is our first baby step at opening them. And when marine ecologists or ecologists in general talk about open versus closed systems, it's like, is something coming from outside of this system that is fueling, is giving these new nutrients to the system, and that's what we are doing here. So what we are doing is that for this particular plankton node, we change a bit the equation, again, a baby step, and we are adding this subsidy. And the subsidy that we're adding is just a constant rate that we did more or less, right? We increase it depending on what we found in the literature that could happen. Yes, so that's what we're doing. And for the productivity side of things. Now, results. All that was framework and methods. The result is that I'm showing really just a tiny part of the results of the project, because I want to show other three other projects. So we just telling like brute force in terms of what is the effect of this harvesting on the web. So we just removed species like brute force, removed the nodes, and to get a sense. So we have in the x-axis fraction of species that were removed, in the y-axis fraction of secondary extinctions caused after this removal, that happened after this removal. So if we remove 0, of course, there is no, well, if we start removing from different sequences. Harvesting is in triangles most connected, the ones that have more interactions. Supporting basal that are the ones that are basal species and randomly. So if you see, removing the plankton is the first one, and removing the basal species is causing more effects than removing the harvesting species. So what this result that is very brute force is telling us is that, it seems that it's more important the bottom up than the top down, very brute force. And when we did further think through this with the dynamic model, in terms of the plankton effect, so we did the subsidy that I showed with the little s, and we reduced that subsidy a lot. And what happens is that the plankton almost goes extinct right there, almost goes extinct, that P small, and the filter feeders are gone. And everything really like decreases in abundance, in biomass. When we increase this plankton subsidy, this is plankton again in P, the filter feeders survive and increase in biomass, and we have the entire food web thriving. So we have, this model has a lot of bottom-up effect, clear. That's what I already said. Filter feeders persist depending on the plankton subsidy, and the rest of the food web thrives with that. So to summarize the results of this project, I didn't show all the results, but this is going to tell you in a nutshell what it is. So if we decrease plankton, that has a very negative result on the network. But, and I didn't show this, but you have to trust me, the artisanal fisheries in the model actually dampens this very, very negative result. That's what we found. And I will talk a little, like I will talk right now. So what we found is that artisanal fisheries are a keystone predator. It's kind of, keystone is a very important word we use in ecology. And what it's saying is that the way that artisanal fisheries extract biomass is allowing some of the species to coexist with others. And how is that happening is that without artisanal fisheries, some dominant competitors would take over the system without that. So that's what we found. So it's through lower interspecific competition between harvested and non-harvested basals in particular, so producers, and also via reducing predation pressure on non-harvested species. So these are mechanisms, and that's the part in which why it's so important to think of the entire community when we study these ecosystems. Indirect effects like these ones can happen that are counterintuitive. Then artisanal fisheries has a slightly negative effect on the network. And but if we decrease plankton, that accentuates, increases the negative effect of the artisanal fisheries on the network. Disclaimer, we're talking about artisanal fisheries, not commercial fisheries for this. We are simulating like artisanal fisheries. So what is happening is that decreasing total food web productivity makes these networks very sensitive to fisheries. So our conclusion for this modeling work was that this is more sensitive to climate change than artisanal fisheries. Thinking that climate change is the one driving the alteration in productivity. Okay, so that's how everything started for us with this project. And the next question was, okay, we were simulating harvesting as this fishing effort, I told you, that is just a fraction. So it's more like an external factor because there is no dynamics behind that extraction, that effort. So what happens if we actually now think about the economics driving these fisheries? So that would be integrating this more dynamically. And we published this work in Science Advances, integrating economic dynamics into ecological networks, the case of fishery sustainability. And what we wanted to understand is this bioeconomic feedback loop. So we have the fisheries extracting, and this is like really simulating more like commercial fisheries. And so these fisheries extracting biomass that has a price, and depending on the yield and the demand, that price might change, and the effort will change correspondingly. And the questions we had and this is like because of the level of complexity, we only focus on a single species fisheries that could be like the cod in Canada. And so we have questions about ecological sustainability. So we focus on if the harvested species went extinct or not, and we label those as age extinctions, and non-harvested species if they went extinct or not in the food web as a result of these fisheries. And then we talked about economic sustainability. So if the fishery, the business stayed in business, which is the fisheries persistence and the level of supported fishing effort. And that's because fishing effort also means food and employment. And again, we use the same model, but now that E is going to be dynamic. And because we wanted to really understand how this model works, the integration with economics, we didn't do it in an empirical network. We did it in a niche model generated network. So it's like just an algorithm generating networks that look like the empirical ones. And we did almost 500 of those theoretical networks. We had only one species, the target species per simulation. And this is the way we model it. And we call it open access. So economists call it open access. And it's like we have the change in effort, fishing effort, changes with market reactivity and gross profit. Gross profit is the yield, that's Y, yield, times the price of the yield. And then there is a cost per unit effort. So it is costly to take a boat on the ocean. So all those costs. And then the way in which the price works is just a linear price model, which is like the one you see in your economics 101 or 100. So it's offer and demand. Okay, so this is how one simulation looks. We picked one that is very dramatic, so you see the results, but there are some that are less oscillatory. So what we did is run the simulation 4,000 time steps, which is more or less 8 years, and then start fisheries. So is to get like a sense of the like steady state, and then we start fishing at that time and run it for other 4,000 time steps. And each line is the biomass of a species in the network. The networks have like about 30 species. And what we're plotting here in this insert is effort, fishing effort. So you see, and this is the key part, that peak there I will keep talking about that peak of fishing effort that happens in the transient dynamics. So this peak is in the transient dynamic is what is driving all the results I will talk about, because this stabilizes the system during the transient. So you don't necessarily see that that's what caused the extinctions. But I'm telling you because we studied the transients. So the transient dynamics propagate through the network, causing the secondary extinctions. And here is the results. So we have different levels of effort for the end of the simulation, at the end of the simulation. So because we are comparing two scenarios, the fixed and open and sustained. Fixed effort is just giving a value to that E variable. That is a fixed effort throughout the simulation. So nothing about peaks. So we're comparing the peaks here. And open and sustained that has all these dynamics associated. And then we have mean percentage of community extinct. So what we're seeing that at the same level of effort at the end of the simulations, the open and sustained, the ones that in which the fishery stayed in business, cost a lot more extinctions than the same effort that is fixed. And the reason is here. And the point is that I will start here. So these peaks at the beginning are such a high level of effort that decreases the biomasses of some species that then cause extinctions. And that thing is, when there is an extinction, you cannot recover that species. So even when the effort went down later and then levels out to later, there are extinctions that are non-reversible. So that's causing the results. And if you keep looking into this, digging deeper, we have this result that explains, so further tells you how this is happening. So we did a cart analysis, if you're familiar about that. But the point is that we found that the only thing in the food web that explained extinctions was the biomass of the harvested species before fishing started, and the maximum price. So thus, the multiplication of both is what I'm showing in a logarithmic scale in the x-axis, and in the y-axis, we have the average peak effort in every 2 years. And what we're having is that the higher this multiplication, the higher either the biomass of the target species before fishing, or the higher the maximum price, the more the peak in effort, and therefore the more extinctions. And what is happening is that, and this is for the non-harvested species, so the rest of the community. Why? Because if the target species is a very abundant species, in general, that is very important in the system. Because of the yield in the effort, everyone rushes to fish that species and decreases the biomass of the species by a lot. So even when that species didn't go extinct, because then there is an adaptation and the effort will slow down because there is not much yield, but already that decrease that is so steep is going to cause the predators and of that, the consumers of that species and others that depend on that species go extinct. So that's the reason. And of course, the price. If the price is high, everyone goes and fishes, rush to fish. That's the term that the economists use. So non-harvested species more likely to go extinct in these situations, even if the target species then recovers. And just a little hint on this other project. So the previous one, it was 3 ecologists trying to use economics. The good thing is that moving to Davis is that I have economists in our department. So now we can actually do a more proper economic work. And Mike Springboard is an expert in bycatch. So now we're able to include bycatch that is very common and more than one fishery. So we actually model more fishers, and we modeled 5 of them. And so we had a target and a bycatch and associated to each of those targets. So it can be multiple fisheries with different bycatch, and 400 networks, fishers as additional nodes in the network. Target species, no, actually it's one target species, chosen randomly among consumers. Bycatch, chosen randomly and as the less abundant consumer. So think of a turtle. And this is what we modeled. So now we don't have, so now we're talking about loss by harvest. So that is going to be extracted in the equation I showed. And this is telling us that if we have the correct information, so we model information here. So if we have the correct information, we know where the target species is, and we're able to avoid the places where the bycatch is. So that's the information here. That's why it's 1 minus gamma, and gamma is where is the correct information. And the efficient effort dependent on this priced information, etc. So it's similar, but with the plan that now we have information to avoid. So there is still price, there is all that, but bycatch is going to close the system. So fishers don't want to capture bycatch, because if too much bycatch is killed, then the fishery is going to be closed for the year. That's the policy. So we're incorporating policy here. So these are the management policies. So open access is exactly the same as before, unrestricted fishing without any conservation goal. Then we have the shared target quota. So all fishers are subject to this. So if there is an amount of level that if the fish in the system that is the bycatch, sorry, we're doing shared target, first target. So it's first about how much of the target is around. If there's too little of the stock in the system at one moment, the fisheries is closed for the year. And that's something that happens, it's an actual thing that happens. Then shared target and bycatch quota. So the target fish and the turtles that get caught by the nets, but they shouldn't be. So there is an amount of bycatch. So if there is very little turtle here, then even if there is enough target species, the fishing is going to be closed. No more fishing, you guys do something else for the year. And I really wanted to present this more as telling you what is possible, so we can really get into management with this, although not necessarily we will yet believe the results, because we still need a lot of more pure science to make sure that these models represent reality or that are useful for management reasons, but is still an exercise to show that this model can work, can be used for management whenever we're sure that the numbers are what they are. Yeah, so I think that I will leave it there for this. So we have results in terms of ecological sustainability, how much target extinctions we got with different levels of escapement, which is this quota. how much bycatch extinctions we get. So that will help us to find those, the escapement level, how much we are allowing the system to have as a minimum to close the fisheries. And also economic sustainability, which our colleague got excited about, because you see that there is a point in which you can still harvest and get good profit out of it without making everyone go extinct. So those are the things we can do. Yeah, so I think I said that. So the first two projects were, the first has both primary productivity and fisheries. The second one went deeper in the fisheries. Now I'm going to talk about the productivity, deeper in the productivity. Okay, so these are the two projects, and I will start with the first one. And that is in the context of this biodiversity in a changing planet designed grant that is about developing these network models to evaluate functional biodiversity responses to climate change and species invasions. So this is more on the climate change side, thinking of productivity being affected by climate change. And people involved in that grant and the work, yes, so these are more about what we are doing here in Stellenbosch right now. We are comparing the 4 upwelling zones on the planet. So it's California current, the Humboldt current off the coast of Chile, the Benguela current off the coast of South Africa. That's why we're in South Africa right now. And off the coast of Portugal and the northern African continent, which is the Canary current. Okay, so the project I will present is this idea of putting the food web box in the ocean. So another baby step to keep opening these models for to represent them better, particularly the marine ecosystems that are really connected to the rest of the ocean. And this is work that we did in collaboration with Edith Withers and John Larger, led by Casey Dugwell here in the room as well. And it's about temporal variability. And this is his work, Casey's work, that is modeling time-varying phytoplankton subsidy, which reveals at-risk species in Chilean intertidal ecosystem. So we keep using the Chilean food web because it's the one that is built, and we have a lot of good data for. And also because I'm Chilean. Okay, so we have this first model I showed you with just a little rate there, which, well, can be a high rate, the subsidy. But now we are going to make that more empirically informed. So this is data we got from our Chilean colleagues, particularly from Edith Withers. And we have chlorophyll, offshore chlorophyll concentration, chlorophyll A concentration, which is a good proxy for phytoplankton. So offshore phytoplankton, food web phytoplankton. So because this is offshore, so it's really telling us the blue line right there. So this is offshore, the blue line. So smoothen out, because models with the differential equation don't like those weird empirical data things. So we have to smooth them out, but still have the variability. And there is a mixing that we are adding here that is telling you how much of that offshore is actually coming to the coast, because we are, again, modeling intertidal ecosystems. So that is on the coast, not offshore, in the coast. So that would be the food web phytoplankton for us with this mixing that is a constant. Okay, so what we found, again, transients. We are finding a lot of effects of transient dynamics on long-term dynamics. And so in the first panel here, we have offshore phytoplankton biomass from our empirical data, smoothen out, and that's one thing. And then our character, the main character of this story will be this sea snail right there. And the food web, right? So I'm compressing the food web that I had 107 species to these functional groups to tell the story. And so here's the offshore phytoplankton that with some constant gets to, like a fraction of the phytoplankton gets into the food web phytoplankton. And there is the model has competition between phytoplankton and algae in the food web, and then the filter feeders eat the phytoplankton, but the snail eats the algae. And then the predators, so there are few predators that eat both filter feeders and the sea snail. So, so the sea snail goes extinct, and goes extinct when we have K-mixing of 1 in this case, and goes extinct because that K-mixing is very high. So like we are studying this K-mixing that is very high. So there is a lot of phytoplankton, which reduces via competition the algae, and there is less resource for the sea snail to eat. And not just that, but the filter feeders grow in abundance. And by growing in abundance, their predators grow in abundance, which then eats more the sea snail. So the sea snail, because of the food web, has 2 negative impacts with a high mixing of offshore into inshore phytoplankton, because both has less resources and the predators grow in abundance. So they get eaten more and they have less food. So they go extinct. So that's what the simulations show. And that's the moment in which, so it's like the algae goes down, predators go up, and that's the moment which the sea snail goes extinct. Okay, so then we have, if we simulate lower K-mixing, then all what I said gets less strong, and the sea snail can persist, and then the transient dynamics is over, and it will persist in the long term. So that really brings us to think about these extreme events. So like this peak in offshore phytoplankton really is telling us that just that peak again, do I have it again? Okay, well, just that peak, this extreme event can have cascading effects through the food web, get this one species extinct, and then the extreme event is over and things go to normal, but we are missing this particular species from this local food web. That's kind of the take-home message. Yeah, and that's why what I say here at the end in this conclusion slide. Okay, so that was temporal variability, so extreme events over time. So now we're going to talk about spatial heterogeneity along the coast. And again, the Chilean coast. And we know that because the topography, the oceanography, all the different environmental aspects, we have a lot of heterogeneity in terms of productivity in the system along the coast. Like really small places, one next to the other, can have very different productivity. And this is something that my PhD student Sophia Simon is leading, and with the help of the postdoc Gail Hill and many others that are present in this room, that are the more experts in the system helping us to develop these models. And what we're doing is trying to have a better resolution of subsidy and basal dynamics. So in that way, we can represent the spatial heterogeneity in the system. And for those that don't know, the Welling system, yeah, I don't think we need that for this particular thing. So the important part is heterogeneity. And we have places in which this upwelling that is caused by wind, and the important part is that nutrients come from bottom up. That's the upwelling. And the nutrients can be high. So nutrients high, this is this row, or nutrients can be low. Particulate organic matter can be low or high. Those are our four very broad categories. And so if we have high nutrients and low POM, we have upwelling centers with strong persistent upwelling. If we have high POM, low nutrients, we have upwelling shadows or bays. We're really focusing on these two because that's how we are going to categorize the different systems along the coast. And the important part, and this is towards showing you towards the end what we're doing with productivity in these models. So we started with this very simple baby step, which is a constant subsidy for the food web phytoplankton and competition between the food web phytoplankton and the algae, which is unrealistic. So now Casey led the work to incorporate this another node, the offshore phytoplankton, that is able to take into empirical data on temporal variability of primary productivity for the phytoplankton. And that is replacing that subsidy constant as a variability given by empirical data. But we're still having this unrealistic competition between food web phytoplankton and algae. And that comes from the allometric trophic network model. That's something that we need to change to represent the marine ecosystem. In the allometric trophic network model, all producers compete via this logistic growth with a community level carrying capacity. So what we are doing now is resolving this thing going on here with the logistic growth that we don't like with these two channels of energy going into the food web. And so from pumped and filtered feeders, nutrients being absorbed by algae and biofilm, which are feeding into herbivores and grazers, which are then consumed by the predators, which are more like the same thing as before. So we have external POM, external nutrients, and then we can simulate how oceanographic currents are bringing those separately and with some advection. And we can also include, if needed, how algae is contributing to POM, depending on the system. Yeah, so I think that we have changed a bit this model, so I'm not gonna show you, it's an ongoing work. But the important part is, again, simulating these two typical like places along the coast for the heterogeneity, spatial heterogeneity. So upwelling shadows are the ones that have a lot of POM, so a lot of offshore POM coming from the oceanic currents, and then the centers, offshore nutrients coming to them. And so far, we have run the simulations. We have found differences in the community structure, and that's what we care about. I'm running out of time, so I will not go over the results, but Sophia's assignment tomorrow in the workshop will show more on this. No, not tomorrow, Wednesday. Okay, so again, the plan is, because we have data along the coast of Chile, we can simulate these different dynamics with different networks along the coast of Chile. Yeah, so with the conclusion now, so we can have some time for questions. The point is that we're using this model to, and hopefully harnessing their power in terms of nonlinear dynamics, computer simulations, data theory integration to study response of biological communities to environmental changes to one day, hopefully inform ecosystem management and conservation policy. So I showed that we can answer those questions with these models. It's just that we need to make sure that the models really reflect what ecology is, and we are working towards that. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention.
Yeah, I get the pleasure. I get the pleasure of chairing the questions. You can choose the questions you get. Who's got the most difficult question? Please, any questions for
Enrico?
There's another one that works better than this one? Like this one? Okay. So now we have time for questions. I'm not sure if online people can ask, but we have people in the room here who have questions.
This is for the question. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Hello, hello. Well, I don't know if people hear me. I presume they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
That's good.
So, Fernanda, on the transient dynamics of that you showed when you have the peaks of chlorophyll, right, of phytoplankton, did you think of including something like a delayed response, you know, as you go upper in the food web? Right, because the model you have, like the biomass is increasing exponentially, but it's instantaneous.
Yeah.
Right. But actually, what happens in reality is that, you know, the energy flows to the predators. They have more offspring, but then the offspring has to grow. And so I was wondering if this delay actually provides some sort of, you know, buffer, and therefore you wouldn't have an extinction immediately following an extreme event. I mean, and the question comes from stability, you know, from the food web dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point, and it's something we've been struggling with. I don't know if struggling, like thinking through. And yes, it's making the model more complex, but yes, more realistic. I think that even like doing stage, like age structure in the models would do that, and I think that have been shown by the name. So many people. No, not Cooperinian. We did that, but like the one really in the model, like anyway, we didn't with Cooperinian, but I didn't want to cite my work. No, there is somebody else that is very famous for this, and I will remember. I know him very well, but I forgot his name. Yes. So yes, he has shown that the effect of stage structure in terms of stabilizing the system in that way. Yeah, in food web models. He even dances tango. No. I will remember after this, and it will be like, okay, why am I?
Not a lot of those people. There's another question, Sergio.
You get a little bit of a time relativity because you scale down to the faster production, so you don't get exactly the same time scale through the food web. So you are actually taking some of that into account. You don't know how much longer it would take to propagate that effect from the bottom, but it's not at the time space of the plankton.
Yeah, but the result is that it is very fast. Like it is faster than we would like. But yeah.
Karen has a question. He's got the microphone.
Yeah.
So I can give it to him.
That's the mic.
So I have kind of two questions. One is when you're implementing those differential equations, do you consider demographic stochasticity or
Not yet.
the noise? So you consider a cutoff threshold for extinction. So of course, the choice of that extinction threshold is very important.
Yeah.
How do
We
you-
choose it very low. We choose it very low. So, and we have done sensitivity analysis, and people have done sensitivity analysis before for the threshold. So, in general, it's very conservative in the sense that those biomasses are going very low.
So the second question is related to the harvesting your model. I think the second part.
Mhm.
So obviously the policy regarding the bycatch is very important. I think in lots of areas they have this policies that bycatch we have to throw back to the ocean. So how do you consider different type of policies?
Yeah, so we did it just with the policy of like there are many ways in which you can implement a policy, and the way we implemented it is via closing the fishery if it's below that threshold, and considering that really once the turtle gets catched, there's no way to send it back. If damaged, it's gonna die. So I think for that modeling experiment, we consider the next level of bycatch, which was informed by this colleague who works with those management policies. So there are many more, but at least we got 4 of them. Yeah, we can keep playing with it, but it was more an exercise to show that it's possible to ask those questions. But I think for me, it's more important to make this model closer to be useful in the sense of the numbers being useful. Like that we're not just doing qualitative work, or if it's just qualitative work, at least it's something that we can trust for those thresholds. Really say, okay, you can't harvest more than this more confidently. And I think that we need a lot more pure science for that.
Question. Curiosity. You don't have to be an expert to ask some more questions. I don't want you to ask it. But yeah, there you go, Mark.
I'm just wondering about the artisanal data that you collect. How do you collect it, and how reliable would that data be?
Yeah, so of course, not everything is reported. So there's a lot of poaching stuff and illegal fisheries. But it was through the data Isidore had from NITheCS, which is kind of like the official agency in Chile that tracks the landings and the how. So it's reported by the fishers when they get to the coast. Yeah, so it's from this official agency. So it's not taking into account poaching. Yeah, but at least it's something, right?
Next steps that you want to work on. What do you think is most critical and within reach, and how you're going to do it? Because you'll, model keep as simple as you can, but not too simple. There are things you want to add. Do you want to talk a bit about where it's going? Like, not like right here and now, but just a little bit of a vision to how where you see this developing.
Yeah, I think that for me is the processes that are the most important for the dynamics of these food webs. So recruitment is something we're actively working on, that's led by Casey. So like dispersal of these larvae, which can be very important in what is happening. But also trying to validate the model. Like we haven't talked about that in our workshop, but that really is something that is always in the back of my mind. It's harder at the community level to validate anything. But like that would be like my career like thinking like goal, because I want these models to be useful. So for now, they're very useful to develop understanding because we don't even have that understanding. Like that's why we only use like single species models for management. But I know from the managers, and I have really getting closer to the managers in my time in UC Davis because there's a lot of connection. They really want this work. They really need it. They all the time talk about the food web, but they don't have anything from us that would help. So they keep using like the typical logistic model with So I would love to have this model tell us something more meaningful, relevant for work to be used by managers eventually.
Be great. Classic sort of applied math, right? You have to get the data, artisanal fishery, get it in, create the model, and then you have to like show that the output actually goes back to reality.
Right.
Yeah, out of maths again.
And several of our team members in my lab, my students, are really thinking through this very deeply. Like it's not like the typical theoretician or model is, let's publish the paper. And no, they're like really stopping to think through this. And I'm really happy that they're doing that. And it takes longer, a lot longer, but it's more meaningful.
I'm not sure how much time we've got. When do you normally wrap up? Okay.
Do you want to read it?
No, you should read it.
Okay. While
Nice voice.
FM is certainly the future of sustainable fisheries and marine conservation in general, my understanding is that even considering a simpler ecosystem presents some difficulty with parameter estimation, in some part due to the lack of quality data on consumption rates and total biomass. In a large model such as yours, how do you decide which species?
I include them all. So that's all the ones that make sense for the habitat we are studying. So that's like the different approach, right? So I include them all. Or I do purely theoretical work. So all the more part of the economic side was all more fully theoretical work. The data was all theoretically generated, but the one with Chile is empirical data. And so that's all the ones that the empiricists told me there are in that particular habitat. So that was in terms of which species to include, so all of them. And then the parameters, the beauty of why we still use this model is because we don't need to parameterize it super exhaustively because we have the allometric scaling. So we just need the body sizes. And then if anything looks strange, like there is something more than body size determining the rate, then we can talk to our empiricists, the empirical collaborators, to tell us more about the rates, specific rates that we care more, because the model told us that the dynamics of the food web depends more on those rates. So that's where modeling becomes really useful. You can evaluate and you can study the model and say, okay, these are the rates we need better data on, and going back to the data source and try to get those parameters more specifically, instead of trying to measure everything that is not possible at the community level. So I took the commitment, like I took my choice is to go big and difficult because we need it, and face the difficulty and use the models to guide empirical work to keep improving those models.
Any more questions? I want to draw it out too much. I noticed a few beverages out there, a little bit. Any more questions? Are you waving your hand, or you just?
Well, thank you for the talk, Fernanda. Nice to see pollination ecologies becoming a true marine ecologist. You saw the light at some point. No, they're really nice, and you've done so much. I have actually really minor question because I didn't fully understand. I really need work. The first one on the economy.
Yeah.
That you had effort, but it seems to me it was more fishing mortality, right? That because you just have an equation relating directly biomass times price. It's not the actual effort of the fisheries because it should go down. You know, you get lower. I mean, it should increase the effort to get the same capture.
Well, the effort is effort because at least it comes from an economic model that models effort. And then in the food web, it got into as mortality.
It's just mortality, yeah.
Inside the food web model, but the variable.
But the fishing effort was measured as fleet or hours or some of the measures of fleet of effort.
No, it's unitless because it's an abstract quantity.
Okay.
So it can represent those, but it's not that really. It's just a unitless variable. Yeah.
Well, it's probably a good time to wrap it up then. Thanks, Fernanda. Great talk, very clear. We all know what